Horizon Europe work program. I'm very pleased to be here today with Manuel Alexo, also from the European Commission, heading the unit for ERA governance and implementation, Anton Zensus, who is the director of the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy, Nicolas Pate, who is the executive director of the EMBRC, ERIC, a research infrastructure working on the marine biological resources, and Anton Jussi, executive director of the IATRIS research infrastructure in charge of translational medicine and dealing with longevity and how we can improve human health. Some practical information for you. So you can use the Slido in order to insert your questions. You have the code here. It's hashtag RIDays WS18. You also have a chat function which allows you to introduce your comments and also discuss among participants. And the session is web streamed. So let me say a few words about the broader policy context of this workshop before I pass the floor to our speakers. So first of all, research infrastructures are facilities that provide resources and services for the research community that help foster, of course, research and innovation. Research infrastructures can be based on a single site, can be distributed or virtual. They can have different forms. They can be knowledge-related facilities. They can be major scientific equipments or ICT infrastructures. And you see here some examples of some forms they can take, from archives to collections, to data infrastructures, to labs, to telescopes, to research vessels, up to, of course, computer systems and communication networks. And of course, research infrastructures extend the frontiers of knowledge, support the knowledge cycle in general, from generation to knowledge generation to circulation and use, and they help the next generation of researchers and support, of course, industrial innovation. Research infrastructures are part of the broader European policy context, which is characterized, of course, from the need for the twin transition towards a sustainable and digital future, also resilient as we recover from this pandemic. Research infrastructures are part of the recovery plan, the European Recovery Plan, and also they are an important element of the European research area as they ensure access to facilities for the researchers and also to generate world-class research and innovation. Last point, of course, we work on policy for research infrastructures themselves. We want to improve the success story of the European research area, and that is why the European Strategic Forum for Research Infrastructure recently published a white paper on making science happen with key political messages for research infrastructures. Research infrastructures, of course, I said it already, are an important pillar of ERA as an ecosystem on its own. Research infrastructures constitute and necessitate strategic investments that provide return for our economy and society. They constitute important knowledge and innovation hubs, as they are enablers for the broader cycle of knowledge. They are an element of coherence between European, national, and regional priorities, and they are an enabler of cohesion and an enabler of international cooperation. They are promoters of open science and fair data. Therefore, research infrastructures are a very important element of the European research and innovation system and policy, and that is what we will be discussing today. So without further ado, I would now like to pass the floor to our first speaker, Manuel Alexo from the European Commission, who will inform us about the recently adopted work program. Manuel.
Thank you very much, Leah. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm here to give you a little bit of an overview of the work program that has just recently been adopted on the 15th of June, in fact. So it's really quite recent. It is now available online on the website, on the Horizon Europe website, along with the other documents and legislation, of course. So first of all, just to situate research infrastructures within the framework program. So as you know, the framework program today, Horizon Europe, has three pillars. the pillar on excellent science, on global challenges, and on innovative Europe. Indeed, there are many differences and innovations in terms of in comparison to Horizon 2020. One of these is, of course, the third pillar on innovation and the European Innovation Council and so forth. On the first pillar, we have three main areas: the European Research Council, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, and the research infrastructures part of the program. This has an overall budget for the 7 years of the program of 2.4 billion euro. Now, the question now, of course, is how do we go from the framework program that gives us the general orientations of the research and innovation program for 7 years to specific work programs where you can find the calls and that then make all of this operational. So what happens is that we've established a strategic plan under Horizon Europe with the key strategic orientations to be followed by the implementation of the framework program, by the work programs themselves. These four key strategic orientations are to promote an open strategic autonomy by leading the development of key digital enabling and emerging technologies, sectors, and value chains. The second one is to restore Europe's ecosystems and biodiversity and managing sustainably natural resources. And the third one is to make Europe the first digitally enabled, circular, climate neutral, and sustainable economy. And the fourth key strategic orientation is to create a more resilient, inclusive, and democratic European society. So these are the four overall key strategic orientations of the strategic plan that we have adopted between 2021 and 2024. Now, moving specifically to the research infrastructures work program, we discussed with the member states specific orientations for the research infrastructures work program. So we're moving from the higher level of general orientations to specific orientations for research infrastructures and for the research infrastructures work program. Now here you find several interesting aspects. One is that it was considered very important to consolidate and enhance the landscape, the current EU research infrastructures landscape. This means to concentrate on aspects such as making research infrastructures cost effective and to ensure that the landscape is sustainable on a long-term basis. As you know, this is always a challenge for research infrastructure, the sustainability, and indeed this was one aspect which was considered very important by member states. Another point which was important was to support open science and data-driven research through the Open Science Cloud and through high-capacity network. This, as we will see a little bit later, this is actually a specific point, a specific aspect of the work program. Then we have another orientation, which is to enable and drive the green and digital transformation through research infrastructure services. So this is also an interesting point because you will find in this work program a few challenge-driven areas, which do give it a new and particular flavor. And then, of course, to push the limits of frontier research, there's nothing new in this. To develop cutting-edge technologies for research infrastructures and to foster innovation. This is also a very familiar objective. And finally, to enhance the international dimension of research infrastructures, because of course we face global challenges. We need to establish contacts between our international counterparts, and we cannot obviously do science in isolation. So moving from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe, you will find some novelties in this work program for 2021 and 2022. One is that you will find that a new challenge-driven approach has joined the science-driven approach, the traditional science-driven approach. You will find some very specific areas in the work program, and we can talk a little bit about that later on. Then we have an emphasis on the customization and integration of research infrastructure services to better support research addressing global challenges and political priorities. So this is also an aspect that you will find in this new work program. You will also see a separation now between the access provision and higher levels of integration in relation to research for the next generation of instrumentation. So these were together in Horizon 2020 and in the previous work programs, and now you will find them separated. You will find also in terms of the European Open Science Cloud, you will find a focus on deployment and consolidation. Yesterday, the co-programmed partnership, the Memorandum of Understanding for the co-programmed partnership was signed during the RNI days. And so obviously this is a part of the normal sequence of development of the European Open Science Cloud. We also have the development of new ICT-based tools. You have the e-brains, which you will also find there. Digital twins. These are in different points of the work program, but I'll explain this a little bit better. And then you will also find new efforts to consolidate the existing landscape of European research infrastructures, and indeed to enhance international cooperation and science diplomacy. So we come now to the actual work program. You will find what we call 5 destinations. Now, the destinations are no more than a coherent narrative in which you will find, of course, the expected impacts of that particular part of the work program, and indeed the calls that are established. So we have the first destination, which we call InfraDev, is about developing, consolidating, optimizing the European research infrastructures landscape, as I had mentioned in the beginning, maintaining global leadership to contribute to a strong, excellent, and impactful European research area by reinforcing research infrastructures capacities in Europe, their role at the global level, and the policymaking in this field. So this is the first destination, the InfraDev destination, where we will find, of course, these consolidation efforts, international cooperation, and so forth. The second destination, which we call InfraEOSC, is about enabling an operational, open, and fair EOSC ecosystem that aims at delivering a web of fair data and services for science, a trusted virtual environment supporting open science based on key horizontal core functions with their corresponding e-infrastructures and service layers accessible to research across disciplines throughout Europe. Then you have the third destination, InfraServe. This is about R&I services to support health research, accelerate the green and digital transformation, and advance the frontier knowledge. This is indeed where we had mentioned earlier about the challenges, this new aspect of challenges that we have included in this work program. Then Infratech, this is the next generation of scientific instruments, tools and methods, and advanced digital solutions that I had mentioned earlier. Here we will find the digital twins, for example, the call on digital twins. And finally, Infranet. This is about network connectivity. This is about the call that I had mentioned earlier, called GEANT, It's about network connectivity in research and education, which will provide high bandwidth networks and network services to interconnect researchers, data, and computing resources.
Thank you very much,
So
Manuel.
I will stop here. I'm probably over time already, and I look forward to continuing our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would now like to pass the floor to our second speaker, Mr. Anton Zensus, who will speak to us about the RadioNet project, which made us proud, not least for the first picture of the black hole. Anton, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Apostolia, and welcome to everybody. I'm glad to be here. I will take you for a few minutes into the world of astrophysics, so bear with me as we dive into space. On April 10, 2019, more than 2 years ago, scientists from Europe and the world of the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration presented this image to the world in a press conference in Brussels and actually in several other places around the world. You may have been among the about estimated 4 billion people who have seen this image at the time. Few of them knew really in depth what it was about, but it captured the imagination of many people. So what you see here is a structure in the universe, actually a distance located from us of 55 million light years. The light has taken 55 million years to come to us. We're looking at the center of a galaxy by the name of Messier 87, which has a mass, a size of an astonishing 6.5 billion solar masses. Yet the scale of this object is similar to that of our own solar system, which contains one sun and a bunch of stars. Making this image, which seems by modern standards of what you can take with your video camera or even your iPhone or mobile phone, seems pretty limited, the relevance of this is remarkable. It is a scientific breakthrough because it confirms the existence of supermassive black holes in such galaxies, but it also confirms a technological breakthrough. Imaging at a quality that is required here is possible. What we actually needed to do was making an image that is equivalent to what you would need to have for a camera to make a picture of someone who's reading the New York Times newspaper in New York City on Times Square, but located from somewhere here in Europe. And finally, this image contributes once again to confirming the theory of general relativity thought up by Albert Einstein 100 years ago. So we're talking about a scientific breakthrough in astrophysics based or confirming ideas that were made 100 years ago, contributing to the general knowledge of science around the world. My point to you is that such breakthrough research is only possible by bringing together, in the end, hundreds of scientific minds from around the world, but also by bringing together, by using together infrastructures that we're talking about today, in our case, telescopes, the most modern radio telescopes in the world. Radio telescopes receive radio radiation that you see here, an example of the telescopes in Chile of the ALMA array with participation of European partners. And what we have to do to take these images is actually we have to connect these telescopes virtually through collecting their data, recording and collecting their data after the event, and building a virtual telescope the size of the Earth. Now imagine you're a young scientist or older scientist in Europe with a bright idea, wanting to prove a theory or a prediction of a theory such as Einstein's. You want to do that in Europe without being at an institution that commands great resources. RadioNet, the infrastructure network in radio astronomy, has operated for 20 years and provided just such scientists an ability to get access to cutting-edge research equipment merely by presenting convincingly their bright ideas. That is the key pillar of the network in the area of the transnational access that we provide. We provide access, we have provided access in RadioNet to radio telescopes, the most advanced and best instruments in Europe and the world through this network for, as I said, over 20 years. The other pillars of the work program include the networking, the building a community in Europe of scientists, the development of cutting-edge, state-of-the-art equipment to improve these telescopes, and the preparing for the future by building and supporting the development of the next generation of such instrumentation. So RadioNet as a network is a collaboration of funding and supporting of European, Central European, but also national funds, a co-funding of these activities, which makes breakthrough research possible. But as such, Emmanuel in his talk highlighted this, also contributed to a number of the global challenges that we face in our day. I just don't want to read them all off, but yes, if you do basic research in Europe, you do create jobs. You make science and breakthrough technical developments possible, and you contribute to the growth of the economy, to the training of the community, and foremost, you contribute to the understanding, to the appreciation of science in the community. All these come together, and I would argue make a strong collaboration, strong contributions to the global challenges. Now, the scientific impact, the impact of science on society is, of course, a thing that's hard to measure. On this one day, though, in April that I talked about, the press conference in Europe, which was introduced by then Commissioner Carlos Moedas, was viewed by, within a few hours, millions of people around the world. The next day, newspapers everywhere around the world showed this image, indicating how much the minds of people, minds of journalists, and then later minds of people seeing this were captured by this scientific breakthrough. I will argue, and I've argued many times, that doing this is a fundamental contribution to the advancements of science and the fundamental contribution to advancement of Europe. In closing, I thank you and look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation. I would now like to pass the floor to our next speaker, Nicholas Page, who will take us to the oceans. Nicholas.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, it's my turn to take you in the other direction from black holes and into the ocean. Now, I can't boast that this will be into the deep parts of the ocean. This is rather be into the coastal waters. So my name is Nicholas Pade. I'm the Executive Director for the European Marine Biological Resource Centre. And I want to talk to you briefly now about what we talk about blue solutions and our research infrastructure for unlocking the potential of the oceans. So we talk about Earth, but we of course live on planet ocean. So 70% of our planet is covered by water. About half of the oxygen that we breathe comes from plants in the oceans. And the biodiversity and all the life in it is providing extremely important sources of food, be it from fisheries, aquaculture and fish, invertebrates, and now also algae, as well as being a good source for novel drugs, be that for cancer treatment or new painkillers, to crop improvements with novel pesticides that have much fewer harmful effects than chemicals, and also for a large amount of animal feed. So human society intricately is linked to the ocean to a far larger degree than most people actually realize. But the ocean and the seas and the life in it are also extremely poorly understood. Despite this being a resource that we depend on very heavily, there's a lot we don't understand about it. We want to have a strong blue economy in Europe. We want to make the most of our oceans. But in order to have a strong blue economy based on innovation, it also needs to be sustainable. So this is the raison d'etre, if you want, to have EMBRC. So we are a distributed research infrastructure across 9 countries with 45 sites for research and experimentation, running all the way from the north in Tromsø all the way down to the coral reefs in Israel. So our mission is to support and facilitate marine biological research and innovation and technological development. And essentially, we try to solve bottlenecks for our research communities so they can push the science forward. In terms of services, our 2 key pillars are access to ecosystems and biodiversity. So for the ecosystems, to allow people to carry out experimentation in situ, be this trying out new agricultural approaches or looking at colonization of the pillars around the wind farms in the North Sea. And then access to the life, be that for wild type organisms for research, culture collections of marine or micromarine organisms for research, but also for providing seed cultures for bioreactors, and then mortal organisms. The marine environment provides actually a number of very important organisms, be it for studying embryology, how cells develop, but also, for example, in cancer treatment. How do cells regenerate? What are their mechanisms for recognizing faulty DNA? And marine organisms provide really good models in there. This is then combined with the facilities that allow people to work on these organisms, be it to grow them, or if you want to look at, for example, climate change scenarios, you want to look at different temperatures or salinity and so on. And then next to that, we have technical analytical platforms. This allows you then with your high-end microscopy, your electron microscopes, to really look into the organisms at the cellular level to understand how, for example, the environment might be changing them. So some of the tools that we're working on developing at the moment, the first thing I want to talk to you about briefly is the genomics observatories. So essentially, we're building a network that we actually just launched on Monday, where we're looking at using genomics technology to study biodiversity. Essentially, we are taking samples from the seawater and then using DNA techniques to see what are the microorganisms that are present in the water. So this gives us a good idea of what is in our ecosystem, what biodiversity is present, and it also allows us to support quite a lot of microbiome research, for example. Then we've been working on preserving microorganisms. So I already talked about the culture collections, which essentially are growing microorganisms in flasks. The problem with that is that as long as they live in those flasks, they keep multiplying and keep evolving. So we've been looking at methods where we can essentially freeze them so they stay the same. And we know that the properties that they have won't be maintained over a long time. So essentially, we flash freeze them with different methods. This is really difficult and also very species specific. We look at developing techniques for genetically modifying organisms. So these are particularly about our model organisms. So we can look at expressing various genes and so on, for example, to see if various treatments are working in single organisms. Develop new instrumentation. For example, we've developed a laboratory-sized tidal system, allowing people to carry out experimentations in the controlled laboratory setting, which will also reproduce tides. Then I just quickly want to give you an overview of some of the different research that we support at EMBRC. So you can see we've got a starfish here of different keywords that we pulled from the different projects that we reserved. But here's 5 good examples of the diversity of research that we cover. So we had one project looking, for example, at elasmobranch fish. So these are your sharks and rays that have cartilage instead of bone. And here the researchers were interested in, well, what can we do with cartilage, for example, in a biomedical application? What can we learn about cartilage to help regeneration, for example, after accidents, things like that. Then we had a project looking at using fungi from the ocean, so micro mushrooms, if you want, for the recovery of precious compounds from electronic waste, essentially seeing if we can use these microorganisms to recycle materials that are present in the ocean. And we've been looking at climate change impact on various aquaculture organisms. So here, for example, the green omer, where we then have looked at, the physiological impact that climate change has, first of all, in a farm setting, but also on wild populations. Then we had this really neat sort of projects that we never sort of expected ourselves, where a company came to us and wanted to look for new ways to produce color in textiles and so on, where they were looking through lots of different bacteria to see how they could create new color, and we had a really neat project out of that. And then finally looking at ecosystem services here, for example, in marine grass. So essentially what EMBRC here is looking for tomorrow's discoveries and solutions in the ocean. So looking at how we can tackle some society's problem, but instead of looking towards the land, looking towards the sea. So our society and our life is crucially linked to the ocean, and its health is linked to our prosperity. But marine biodiversity also offers an opportunity for humankind for developing new products, for looking at new sources of food. And we must learn how to manage and monitor these living resources sustainably. And this is where EMBRC can support this research by essentially providing the tools, facilities, expertise, and access to improve our understanding of the role of life in the sea and in a sustainable way. So if you're interested in what we're doing, please look at our catalog on our website, follow us on Twitter. We've always got interesting bits about the marine life. And I look forward to any questions from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And now I would like to pass the floor to our last speaker today, who is Mr. Anton Jussi, who will talk to us about biomedical research and the iatrics. Eric, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Very nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Just looking to see how to change the slides. Yes, great. So I'm from IATRIS, which is the translational research infrastructure in medicine in Europe, which really is about that rickety bridge that you see in front of you, which is trying to navigate a very difficult long path from the insights, the fundamental discoveries that are made in the laboratory, the insights that clinicians makes about their patients, trying to turn that into the new medicines and the new vaccines and the new diagnostics that help us improve health for the European citizen. It's extremely expensive, extremely high risk, lots of failure on the way. So in fact, it takes about 10 to 15 years to develop one single new medicine. Many failures before that one will actually succeed. And so on average, it actually costs around 2.5 billion euros for that one single medicine. That's also why in some cases we see very high prices for medicines, which is a very important discussion that Europe is undergoing at the moment. So IATRIS is basically the European infrastructure whose job it is to traverse that pathway, try and get an understanding made from that first publication by a scientist and try to turn that into a high-value medicine that can really help patients become better from their illness. And we're a membership organization like EMBRC, etc. 14 countries. We have about 114 institutes, so that we really can cover any type of study, any type of disease, any type of medicine as well, including the really novel, exciting gene therapies, CRISPR-Cas technologies, and the sort of things now that we see some amazing results in some very difficult diseases. So we cover any type of platform, and we're a European Research Infrastructure Consortium, which is an international type of organization to help work across borders. So with the IATRIS, what we do is, I think that the COVID-19 pandemic was actually a good opportunity for us to see just how important science is. It was only because coronaviruses have been so well studied in the past through basic science, through the regular funding of European scientific institutions and research elsewhere in the world, that we understood coronaviruses so well that we were very quickly able to establish targets that we wanted to hit the virus with vaccine antigens and develop the vaccines that are now so broadly being disseminated across Europe, and sadly not as quickly as we like beyond. So because of that, and because COVID was such a pressing challenge for Europe, we saw a lot of studies come to IATRIS. So we instigated a very quick response time so that we could help people understand where to find our partners within 48 hours. So in the end, we ended up with, I think, around 30 studies, half of which were academic and the rest were governmental or industry studies. And it really covered the whole range of early stuff, trying to see, does this medicine work in an in vitro study, all the way through to helping get regulatory advice to understand what clinical trials would have to be undertaken to take this through to marketing authorization. It was a very exciting time. Nice to see how both academia and industry turned all their labs around and pushed into understanding COVID and trying to develop medicines and vaccines. We're still working on that. There's still a lot to be done. Very exciting to see that in our institutions in Europe, there was a lot of great work being done. For instance, at our central institution in the Czech Republic, the Institute of Molecular and Translational Medicine in Olomouc by Professor Marian Hajduk, they developed a COVID gargling test that allowed, instead of having to do the nose swabbing, which you've all probably had and probably hated, this is through gargling with tap water, and that is now under development and is, I think, almost in market. And all the way up through to University of Eastern Finland under Professor Seppo Ylö-Hurtula, who is our Finnish node director. They're developing a vaccine that doesn't require injection, but is a nasal spray vaccine, and that's entering clinical trials. Very exciting times. But COVID's not the only thing. Feels like it sometimes it is, but it isn't. And unfortunately, we still have some diseases that we thought we were long rid of, but sadly not. The reality is malaria, for instance, kills 400,000 people a year globally. So there's a lot of work to be done in a lot of areas. So IATRIS and ECRAN, a sister organization in clinical trials under the European Vaccines Initiative, TransVac, has been working with a Japanese academic group and industrial organization with our partners in Portugal to have a phase 1 clinical trial set out for a new malaria vaccine, which is very exciting, and it feels good to have such high impact research. I'm going to give one more slide and then I'll try and leave some time for discussion. I think what's very important in Europe, we see citizens and patient engagement and involvement in the research process becoming more and more recognized for its value and its necessity. And so what we're seeing is that that's happening a lot more. At IATRIS, we're trying to accelerate that. So for instance, we're a member of UPATI, which is an organization that trains patient experts, so that patients who have experiential expertise can also develop the expertise to become to support the research and development process, helping patients become co-creators and masters of their own destiny. And we work also, for instance, with European Patient Forum and European AIDS Treatment Group in one of our flagship projects, InfoDev, which was described by Manuel earlier, on patient engagement with the Patient Advisory Committee, really helping us get the patient involved in research. And also in other areas, for instance, in the European Joint Programme in Rare Diseases, we work with Eurordis as well, who are a very important rare disease umbrella organization. I'm going to leave it there because we have not much time now for discussion, but obviously it's our member states who we have to thank for the time and the energy they put into making these infrastructures work. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Anton. In the meantime, a number of questions have appeared in Slido. Maybe we can project them so that all participants can see them in terms of most voted questions. I can already see, I had a glimpse in our Slido poll, and I saw that there is, of course, very strong support for funding for research infrastructures. It comes as no surprise. And if I take them in the order of most voted questions, I see a question addressed to the Commission, to Manuel, regarding the potential of synergies to support the use of transnational access to research infrastructures. Manuel, a very short reply, maybe in order to have the chance to take also the other questions.
Very, very short. Indeed, there are a couple of questions in Slido that I've just been looking at myself about the level of funding. Indeed, for us, of course, we would always like a higher level of funding. We would always prefer to have more funding, but this is not the case. Of course, we need to work with what we have, so we need to prioritize. Now, that is a very good comment there, that indeed synergies need to be explored. And the framework program today gives us many more possibilities for this. So I won't now go into detail because I know that we don't have time, but it's simply to say, yes, indeed, we can explore the use of synergies, and we need to do that. And the framework program allows us more flexibility to do that. Synergies with other programs, of course, and with other sources of financing. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have a question addressed to Professor Zensus regarding the possible support that that Astronomy can receive for the InfraServe part of the topics. Any comments?
Yes, as the question alludes to, the RadioNet community is now participating in the Opticon RadioNet pilot, which is shaping or studying possibilities for co-funding transnational access in the future. And the challenge that I see, the key challenges I see here is to keep the community of many different players, small and large in Europe, both in observations and at the access, but also the development together, and maintaining this role of the EU together with the national partners to allow the access to all scientists, at not just the large established institutions, but also the smaller ones. The final challenge, of course, is to now grow the community of scientists and engineers that know each other well into a much larger pan-European community that brings the challenges of the different cultures in research and engineering. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I'm trying to get as many questions as possible. Thank you for your short replies. So the next question is a question which is addressed to the Commission, but maybe other panelists may want to take it as well, because I think it's a broader question regarding, in particular, the trade-offs between strategic autonomy and connecting in the world of research infrastructures. Who would like to take the floor maybe on this point? Maybe we give the possibility to either Anton or Nicholas to say something about it.
Do I understand? Sorry, I'll take it. If the strategic autonomy of the member states individually, or strategic autonomy of Europe as a whole?
Of Europe, it is something that emerged from the pandemic very strongly. We saw it, for example, in value chains.
Yeah.
So, any comments from?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think that the regionalism that COVID demonstrated we're capable of, that will never change. So I think we need to be sure that we have sufficient self-sufficiency for such things in the future, but we shouldn't be foolish and think we have to build iron walls around Europe. I think there's a lot of opportunity to work with other regions while being sure that we have good plans in place. I think the problem with COVID was we weren't prepared, and which is a pity, because about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the Ebola outbreak, that gave us an opportunity to reflect what would happen. And a lot of people in the field, epidemiologists, were talking about preparedness. It was a good discussion, but then everybody forgot and we went away. And I think we need to learn from COVID. Let's be prepared. Let's have a strategic plan. And then that nationalism, that regionalism will be less evident, because we'll know what we're doing and we'll be ready for it.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, we see at the other questions that that pop up, we see more questions to the Commission regarding electron microscopy, research infrastructures. Manuel, would you like to reply briefly?
Yes, of course. Well, the first thing that I would like to say is that indeed we will have an info day next week on Monday, where we can clarify many of these aspects and explain in much more detail some of the things that I've only touched very briefly here. So I don't blame you for being a little bit confused at this point, our colleague who sent this comment. Naturally, we do need to explain a little bit better. So I would suggest to all who are available to participate in the info day on Monday. Are we going to increase the budget for the next work program in 23-24? Well, we will have to see the results of the calls in this work program, and then we will assess the needs to change this in the next work program. So it's still early to say. The work program has only just been published. The calls will open, and then we'll see and we'll assess.
Thank you. And if I may add, also on my side, there have been also questions regarding how to prepare proposals. So this will all be addressed in the info day, as Manuel said. In the meantime, we also saw questions regarding links to policy initiatives in research infrastructures and the work program. So as you know, work programs are prepared with stakeholders and with member states. And of course, we do our utmost in order to link policy priorities and work programs, but at the same time, we have to stick to to our legal base and to have opportunities for newcomers, for everybody. So this is the trade-off that you see in the work program. So this replies to the question about the links with S3 roadmap. So we do our best to introduce the links, but at the same time, also member states, of course, are active players in that sense. Now we're approaching the end of our session. We are about to finish the time allocated to our session. I would very much thank you. We are also trying in parallel to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.